Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us for Accessia Health's Amplify Your Voice, Control Your Care, Reducing Risk with Healthy Habits webinar. We are so happy that each of you could join us for what we are sure to be a very informative session. I am Tiara Green, Vice President of Operations with Accessia Health, and your moderator for today. Before we get started, I'd like to cover just a few housekeeping items. First, all lines are muted throughout the duration of the webinar. However, we welcome you to submit any questions that you may have through the Q&A section on your screen. We will save time at the end of the presentation to answer any of your questions. For the convenience of some viewers, those who are hearing impaired, closed captioning has been turned on. We will also be recording this webinar and it will be available on our website at accessiahealth.org. We also have polls throughout the session and hope that you participate as they pop up on your screen. And we know that we have disclaimers anytime that we have a presentation. So Accessia Health webinars, events, and conferences are intended to provide information to the public. The views and opinions expressed by any speakers or other third parties are not necessarily those of Accessia Health. Without further ado, I am excited to introduce our speaker for today, Dr. Grant Lisetor. Dr. Lisetor received his undergraduate degree in nutrition in 2010, and in 2014, he received his doctorate in chiropractic from Life University. He has been in private practice for the last 7 years, and his Charlotte-based practice has grown to be one of the largest in the area. He has focused his career on serving and educating patients, allowing them to regain control of their health. The majority of his postgraduate education has centered around pediatric and perinatal chiropractic care. He is a board member of All Things Possible Medical Fundraising and personally takes on multiple philanthropic initiatives every year. One of the largest is an annual Thanksgiving drive where he oversees the preparation and delivery of over 300 meals on Thanksgiving Day in an effort to feed families that would likely go hungry otherwise. Dr. Lisetor, thank you for being here, and we look forward to the information that you have for us today.
Awesome. Thank you for having me, Tiara. I'm excited to be with you guys today. So my kind of headspace around health might be a little bit unique, although I don't believe that this is, so to say, an outside the box paradigm. I think this is stuff that most people are aware of, but we kind of don't prioritize it until it's placed directly in front of our eyes sometimes. So I want to start off with a really simple question. What is health? And how do you know if you've lost your health? What I have come to understand in my career is most individuals determine their health or lack thereof based upon the presence or absence of symptoms, such as if we have symptoms or we're symptomatic, we are sick, but if we don't have symptoms, we are healthy. And I want to kind of mess with that a little bit for a moment. So let's think about a typical common cold, right? The rhinovirus, typical cold, and our body innately will have symptoms to help us fight that viral infection. So we have a fever, and that fever, that increase in body temperature is going to help our body fight that viral infection. It could be a bacterial infection, right? But it's going to help our body fight the infection because bacteria and viruses don't survive well at high temperatures. Oftentimes we are congested as well. It's not a fun thing, but it's our body's innate response to help us prevent from being further infected. And then we're usually really fatigued. Our body is trying to force us to go to sleep, to rest so we can heal and kind of give our immune system a boost there. And what we're being taught are that fevers are bad or fevers are dangerous, but fevers are an innate response to infection. So we take drugs to lower or reduce our fever, but we are effectively just impacting our body's response to the infection. And we take decongestants, right, because we don't like to be congested. But again, we're also messing with our body's innate response to the infection. And lastly, we'll probably consume some coffee, hopefully coffee, and not some of the other, high sugar energy drinks or artificially sweetened energy drinks. So we effectively stop or fight against all those innate responses. and admittedly, and just kind of a preface, most of you guys on this call will probably know this already, but one of the worst things can happen with a fever is we can have what's known as a febrile seizure, a seizure associated with a high temperature. And so, there are dangerous points to a fever, but a lot of the time it doesn't reach that point, and we are lowering or reducing our body temperature to really just kind of mess with what our body's trying to do. So other side of the coin here is, what if we don't have symptoms? Does it mean that you're healthy if you are asymptomatic? And there should be a resounding no as you guys are watching this. We know the top 2 leading causes of death in the world are heart disease and cancer. And I believe, just looking at stats and trends, probably within the next 5 years or so, cancer will actually exceed heart disease. But why these 2 diseases are the top leading causes of death in the world is there's usually no symptoms until we find out we are going to die from it, or in some cases have already died. Usually people find out they have heart disease when they have a heart attack. So we could have somebody who's asymptomatic moments before their heart attack and believe that they are healthy, when obviously this person couldn't be further from health. So how do you know if you have lost your health? I think this is a great question to pause and ask ourselves, because there are certain indicators. Right now there's a lot of conversation about the human body and obesity. What are the definitions of obesity? There's this conversation of body shaming that I don't really want to go down that path ultimately, but what we know is that if you have increased abdominal fat, your risk of death is increased from all causes. And so that's not necessarily one thing, but it's just one litmus test. It's just one thing we can look at. But we have plenty of skinny people who are sick too. So we can't really say it's okay, how does your body look? It's just one component of it. So how do you know if you've lost your health or are in the process of losing it before disease shows its face? In our society, and especially in the United States of America, we have a really expensive healthcare system. And I don't know if you guys know this. I'm going to head myself. We're going to go ahead and go to a poll question. How would you rate your healthy habits? All right, so everybody's kind of answering that. Okay, so most people on this call saying that we're doing a pretty good job. Could do better, but we're doing a pretty good job, or maybe slightly around average. Okay, so awesome. I love that. Thank you for your participation. That does help me as we're going along this call. So our healthcare system is here. The United States of America last year spent that top number is $4.1 trillion, which breaks down to about $12,000 per person in this country. So we have the most expensive healthcare system in the world right now. Number 2 in healthcare expenses is Sweden, and they spend about 38% less than we do on healthcare expenses. So we have a very expensive healthcare system. And you might think, okay, well, maybe the reason why we have an expensive healthcare system is because we highly prioritize our health in this country. Maybe. The United States of America, we consume a lot of pharmaceuticals, and we're actually one of the only countries in the world where pharmaceutical advertising direct to consumer is legal. So most countries never see or have never seen a pharmaceutical ad before, which might be a little foreign because I think it's around every third ad on TV is a drug or pharmaceutical ad, and we hear them on the radio too. So I wanted to bring you guys' attention to this. This was a study completed in 2016, and what it was looking at was saying over a period of 20 years, what did pharmaceutical consumption look like? And so from 1996 to 2016, it was shown that the population of the US increased by about 21%. But during that same period of time, pharmaceutical consumption increased by 85% in the US. So we are far exceeding what population growth and trends are suggesting. Why does this mean anything? Why should you care about this as you hear these statistics? That number means that the average American filled 14 prescriptions in 2016. So if you think back to 2016, how many prescription drugs did you fill? And if the answer is less than 14, you have to thank your neighbor. That's the law of averages, right? So we take a lot of drugs. We're spending by far and away more money on healthcare than anybody else in the world. Where would you guys guess we rank for health and longevity? And I've asked this question to a lot of people, and usually the responses I get is, we're not doing the best, but most people still think we're in the top 10 or just outside of the top 10. So according to the World Health Organization, in 2019, the US ranked 35th for health and longevity. And we're behind countries like Cuba. So it's not an ideal circumstance. And before I mentioned Sweden, I don't know if you guys recall that. So Sweden, they are up there at number 6, spending 38% less than us on healthcare. So I think if we take this information and we were to summarize it, I believe that we really don't have a healthcare system here. It's more of a sick and reactive care system. We wait till our health is failing till we do anything about it. And it's unfortunate because that's usually what I see in my practice as well. And I don't want to play the sexist card, but usually men are worse at this than women. I think that's probably part of why women typically live longer than men. But I'll have a man come into my office and he's had like a shoulder problem, and I'll ask him about a shoulder problem, and he goes, "Yeah, it's really been bothering me for the last couple of months." I'm like, "Okay, well, when did you first experience shoulder pain?" It's like, "Yeah, it's been going on for 2 decades." And so he's finally doing something about this after he's put it off for 20 years, and he has no other choice but to do something about it. And so that's kind of one of the challenges we have, I think. And it might be more of a cultural thing, but our healthcare system as a whole, I would argue, is a little bit of honestly, not a little bit. We are failing. I believe we are failing as a nation with our healthcare system. So my background and my training, I'm a chiropractor, and this guy on the screen here, his name is Dr. BJ Palmer. And one of his famous quotes is, "The preservation of health is easier than the cure of disease." And that's kind of, if we were to abide by that in our country, it would be transformational. Are we focused on preserving our health, or are we waiting for our bodies to break down and try to treat the disease or cure the disease? So what role does chiropractic care play in this conversation? Because most people think about chiropractic care and they think about aches, pains, discomfort, things of that nature. And there's a lot of literature and research to show chiropractic care is really helpful for some of those musculoskeletal complaints. Our real focus, though, is around the nervous system. So the nervous system controls and coordinates every other function of the body. Your nervous system is made up, central nervous system, the brain, hopefully, in your skull. And we have the brainstem, spinal cord, and the spinal nerves that go to every organ and tissue in the body. And what can sometimes happen is those spinal modes meant to protect the nervous system shift out of proper alignment and create pressure, tension, and stress in the nervous system. Most people see that and they look at that picture there. They say, "Ouch, I've heard of that before. That's called a pinched nerve, so it's be very painful." Truth behind it is the average human body has around 41 miles of nerve in it, and only about 18% of those nerves can feel pain. So we can have this neurological tension. It's impacting our health, and it's usually painless. Hence why I believe that chiropractic care is one of those foundational things that should be done for a healthy lifestyle. Because if we think about twofold, let's think about the person who's working out all the time, but they have a poor structure to their spine. They are strengthening the muscle around that poor structure and arguably speeding up arthritic deterioration. Or we have the person who, or the person who is really healthy, shops at Whole Foods, organic foods, goes to the farmers markets all the time, but they have a lot of irritation in the nerves going to their gut, right? We can talk about the vagus nerve or vagal tone. There's a lot of different components to this, but there's irritation ultimately where we are not absorbing those nutrients from the food we're eating as well as we should, and truthfully flushing some of it down the toilet. So that nervous system really plays a big role in this. And if we can improve the function of the nervous system, we can improve the health of the body as a whole, both structurally and physiologically with the nervous system. So to go a little deeper on this, the real question that I like to ask is, are you being chased by a tiger all day? And it might sound kind of funny, but most people in our society are. You guys might have heard of the fight or flight response and the rest, digest, and heal response. So the fight or flight response is coordinated by what's called your sympathetic nervous system. And most people are walking around 24/7 being chased by a tiger. So what this means is when you're in that fight or flight response, your body, your nervous system will actually shunt blood away from your visceral or digestive organs and move it towards your muscle, your skeletal muscle, so you can fight or flight as implied. It will also impact your hormones. So a lot of people don't think about that, the endocrine system. It's not important to reproduce if you're being chased by a tiger. It's not important to sleep if you're being chased by a tiger. We can talk about the constant cortisol production and how that will also have a negative impact on other reproductive hormones. And we think about, blood pressure. Yes, your blood pressure is going to go up if you're being chased by a tiger. It's a natural innate response, but it's only supposed to be like that for a short period of time. We have people in our society that are like that 24/7. And this is all, ultimately, it's a stress response. That's why this is happening. And obviously, we can't do much about some of these stresses. It's, yes, there's financial stresses, there's work stresses, it could be relational stresses, stresses with our kids, our spouses. There's so many different types of things that can impact this fight or flight response. So if we can't stop the outside in stress, what if we were to impact how our body responds to it? So with chiropractic care, as we make adjustments, we are stimulating that parasympathetic nervous system, that rest, digest, and heal part of your nervous system. And so as we do that, we help your body adapt to this unavoidable stresses at a higher capacity. And that's really foundationally, that's it. How do we maximize that adaptive capacity of the human body? And the other stresses that we could talk about are chemical stresses. What are we putting in and on our body? Emotional stresses and the physical stresses. And most people associate chiropractic care with physical stresses, such as falls, right? We have car accidents. Our office, we actually see a lot of pediatric patients, and we have a lot of women who are pregnant or prenatal care, or I should say perinatal, because we start to see them as they're in that process of trying to get pregnant. And why we see these patients of this age and what kind of the demographic of what they're going through, we have some of the sickest kids in the world right now, most medicated. We look at rates of autism. The CDC says it's at 1 in 44. And, it's wild to me. You look back in the 80s and we've just had, you compare these rates of autism and how it has just exponentially increased. ADHD is the most commonly diagnosed childhood disease in the world right now. We have childhood diabetes. And then the other things that seem more simplistic, but it's still a big deal, is nocturnal enuresis, asthma, things like that. And so as we're taking care of these kids, there's a lot less to do about, trying to treat aches and pains. It's just more about how do we calm down that fight or flight response. And, we could go a lot deeper and talk about kids with autism and brain development. We have children with lower tone on certain hemispheres of the brain, and our aim is to help stimulate that hemisphere. And we look into different reflexes that might be retained that should have gone away by the time they're about 12 months old. So we really kind of do a deep dive into some of this to make sure that we can maximally help these kids, because our headspace, and we look at, from an outside in versus inside out healing process. So we're taking pills, potions, and lotions. Yes, there's a time and place for it, but I believe it should be a last resort. And in our society, it's become more of a first turn. And if you, just from an objective standpoint, if you look at it, who is healthier? The person taking more drugs or the person taking less drugs? It's usually the person taking less drugs. And then we can look at drug interactions. And, if you're taking 3 to 4 drugs, we are at a point where we can't really measure the number of potential drug interactions that can happen. And so there's a deep path to going here. And my headspace, and I will, this is how me and my family operate personally. It's just, there's a time and place for drugs, but it should be a last resort, not a first turn. And that's really it. How do we make sure our body is functioning and adapting at its optimal potential? So I want to talk about counting chemicals, not calories. Before we do, I think there might be a question in here. Let's see if I can pull this up. Oh, closed captioning. Sorry, that's it. That's all that came up. All right. Here we go. So we have a poll. Do you read food labels to find out what you are consuming? Okay, so we have about a 50-50 split. So I think this will be hopefully helpful because I believe the food labels have a lot more stock in them than ultimately the calories or the nutrition facts, in my opinion. Because we can look at, yes, grams of fat, protein, we can look at certain aspects of it. I do think sodium, if we were to talk about it specifically as it relates back to blood pressure, could be some more causative factors. If we look at, high sodium consumption, alcohol consumption, smoking, things of that nature. And Deborah Carpenter asked, what is your opinion of neurological integration system therapy? Truthfully, I don't have enough background or have looked at enough literature to give you a detailed answer on that. All right. So continuing on, I wanted to talk about some key chemicals. Maybe. There we go. So number one, a simple thing to ask yourself, how many ingredients are in your food labels? And some people can even pronounce what those ingredients are. I think, something that I put in my head is how many steps did what I'm about to eat have to take from its original form to get to where it is in my hand or in this package, right? It's like, if you're eating a piece of bread, or we can look at more, a protein bar, or, in some cases we can look at Pop-Tarts or fast food stuff. And it's just, how many steps did that food have to take to get to the form that it currently is in? And the less steps, typically, the better. So first ingredient I want to discuss today, hydrogenated or partially hydrogenated oils. So AKA trans fats. So these are oils that are lab manufactured. So they literally, as it sounds, they are just putting hydrogen in places that it doesn't really belong. It helps with shelf life, but there is a lot of evidence to support the fact that this is not a good thing to have in your body. This is poison. If you see on your food label hydrogenated or partially hydrogenated oil in the ingredients list, I would not purchase that food personally. I would advise you guys to do the same. Do not consume that. That is not something you want in your life for you or your family. Where the tough part comes in is if we are eating out at a restaurant, you don't really have control of this. You have less control about what your food is being cooked in or what is in your food. So there are certain restaurants, obviously, that really prioritize health and are more open and transparent, and some are less transparent. You can often access that stuff online. So the next ingredient I want to discuss is soy. So soy, soybean oil, soy lecithin. And I believe soy is really tough to avoid. Thankfully, there are more food manufacturers that are being open about soy components. Soy components being included in their foods and the ingredients list, such as if we look at baked goods. Soy lecithin is everywhere in baked goods. It's very hard to avoid. If we look at the food industry, fast foods, they are using vegetable oil, which will often contain soy. You think about like a hibachi grill, they're typically using vegetable oil to cook their stuff in, which will contain soy. Donuts, stuff like that. Anything that's fried will typically be fried in some type of vegetable oil that will usually contain soy. So why is soy a bad thing? Soy is what's called an estrogenic. And if you've never heard of the term estrogenic before, I would encourage you to do some homework. Estrogenics, there is a mound of evidence against them. There's several types of estrogenics. Some that we can discuss as a 10,000-foot overview on the topic. Lavender, aerosolized lavender is an estrogenic. Aerosolized marijuana is an estrogenic. So those are natural components that are estrogenic. Soy, right? It's a naturally occurring thing that contains or is an estrogenic. We have plastics, so BPA, BPS. These plastics are estrogenic. And there's a lot of different chemicals that are inside of cosmetic products that are estrogenic. But to focus specifically on soy, and what an estrogenic is. So these are chemical compounds that will mimic estrogen. They will fill estrogen receptors inside the body. And these estrogenics have been linked to specific health concerns such as obesity, depression, reproductive cancers, infertility. And if we were to just consider infertility right now as one aspect of this, rates of infertility have skyrocketed over the past 20 years. 20 years ago, you look back and it's just IVF. Nobody knew what it was. It was such a rare thing, and now it's a common conversation for people. There's just such a hard time for people to conceive in certain environments, and if we were to minimize these estrogenic compounds, it would be helpful. But when we think about just living a healthy lifestyle, we wanted to avoid or minimize the risk of specific types of cancer. We wanted to make elevate our mood just to be healthier. If you see soy in the label, I would advise you not to buy it. So here is another one that it's very tough to avoid in the fast food industry. You guys, some of you guys might be more familiar with this than others. I know Chinese restaurants for a while were really big on saying that they were MSG free. So MSG is monosodium glutamate, has several other terms it is known by on food labels, so including glutamic acid, calcium caseinate, sodium caseinate, autolyzed yeast extract, and there are several other names that MSG can be known as. And why MSG is in food is it's not really a spice, it is a flavor enhancer. So this is actually fooling your brain into thinking your food tastes better than it does. Some sources will argue that it can help with satiation, so feeling full, more fulfilled from the food you eat. There's evidence to show that this is not a good thing, and a lot of it has been done in rats. So if you look through the period evidence, there's more evidence in rats than human studies. But if there is a risk that it can cause this type of stuff, it's not something that we want. So oxidative damage, specifically, we're talking about cancer, right? So oxidative damage, liver, brain, kidney, that's the type of stuff what we don't want to have happen in our body. So again, I would argue if you see this type of stuff in your food, try to minimize it. It's hard to completely eliminate it, but try to minimize it. Nitrites and nitrates. So I know some of you guys, especially if you're Italian, you're gonna be like, oh my gosh, this guy, he's telling me I can't have my prosciutto, and so I get it. But these nitrates and nitrites are really, really not a good thing. And there are more companies, I think it's Applegate Farms, has a lot of these cured meats that are nitrate free. Excuse me, they're using more of the old fashioned, just salt and general seasonings to try to preserve the meats longer term. It still doesn't have as great of a shelf life as meats with nitrates and nitrites. So why do we want to avoid these? Again, they're carcinogenic. They're going to cause cancer. We don't want to consume a heavy amount of them. So if you're purchasing these, just usually they're shrink wrapped in the deli section. So let's say, I don't know what grocery stores you guys have around, but if you go to like a Publix, a Kroger, those type of stores, if you go to the deli meat section, oftentimes you can ask to still see the ingredients list prior to having it cut and wait for you at the deli. So just try to minimize that as best you can. Food coloring. So this stuff is really interesting. I mean, number one, I can tell you that there are natural ways to color foods. Beet is a great way if you want to add some coloring to your food. There are a lot of natural companies now that are using beets and other types of just natural sources for coloring. So these coloring sources are petroleum based and not only arguably carcinogenic, but red 40 specifically is also estrogenic. So this is one that we were talking about with soy. This is tied in where this is mimicking estrogen in the body. And if you think about, our kids consuming licorice, red popsicles, those type of things, or even stuff that doesn't even look red, it could look like a different color, but it serves no nutritional purpose except to make food look more appealing. And it is a harmful thing that we should do our absolute best to avoid. And I just think more about kids with this, because this stuff is in a lot of stuff that, parents give to their children. high fructose corn syrup. So this has really gotten a bad rap over the past decade or so. People are more and more aware that we shouldn't consume high fructose corn syrup. It's in sodas. Typically it's in things that we really, if you're living and eating a healthy lifestyle, this is stuff you probably don't consume in excess anyway. But if you are consuming it, it's just, okay, I'm having, gummy bears, or, you go to the movie theater snacks are usually full of this stuff. And then soda pop or soda pop, Coke, depending on what part of the country you're in, depending on what you call this, but it's in most types of soda as well. And high fructose corn syrup, big concern, general weight gain, type 2 diabetes, high triglycerides. Type 2 diabetes is plaguing our nation. We have the high fructose corn syrup. It's really high glycemic, meaning that it is really spiking blood glucose levels super fast. And it's kind of more of this, instead of like a smooth bell curve, we just have this quick little spike. There's nothing to go along with it. Yes, we could try to consume other foods, higher fiber, lower glycemic, to kind of, we're still going to get a spike, but we want to level it out a little so that it just doesn't immediately dip down. But one of the concerns with high fructose corn syrup, and truthfully just sugar in general, anything that's going to really spike your blood glucose fast, if you do this over and over and over again, it could impact the sensitivity your body has to that glucose insulin combination, and impact the penetration of the cells for the body to use the glucose as energy. Hence, we develop type 2 diabetes. And there's a lot of evidence available to look into things to try to reverse type 2 diabetes. Most people think that once they're given that diagnosis, it is a permanent thing, but it is a self-inflicted disease, and there are ways to make extreme lifestyle changes to try to reverse it. Not do all cases. If it's a path you go down, I would encourage you to work closely with your medical doctor and make sure that they're on board and you're walking this path together, and being very wise about it, because if you do this incorrectly, it could literally be deadly. Artificial sweeteners, since we're on the topic of diabetes. So most people with diabetes are told to avoid sugar and ironically, usually high fructose corn syrup, stuff like that, that's going to spike your insulin, or your blood glucose rather. So, and then hopefully your insulin as well. So these artificial sweeteners have really gained popularity. Aspartame was made illegal, then later legalized by the FDA. Still not permitted. I think it's the European Union does not allow aspartame to be used. It's still permitted by the FDA in the United States of America. There are a lot of alternatives that can be used instead of these artificial sweeteners. So I guess before we go into the alternatives, let's talk about some of the concerns. So cardiovascular issues, disease, cancer, weight gain, and more research coming out about gut health, gut microbiome. So a lot of people are consuming probiotics, kombucha, kefir, sauerkraut, kimchi, things like that, with this good fermented food to try to improve our gut health, gut bacteria. And if we're disrupting that microbiome, ironically, that might be some of the cause, going back to the heart disease, because we have certain gut bacteria that will increase the lining of our gut, which would prevent some of the garbage we consume to get into our bloodstream. So, right, if you have an abundance of specific bacteria and you eat a greasy cheeseburger, less of that garbage from the greasy cheeseburger is going to end up in your bloodstream. So if we take care of our gut health, we will arguably be healthier if we do and occasionally eat something that's not the best for us. So alternatives to these sweeteners. Some people talk about stevia. Not most people know what stevia is and don't really care for it. It's got a weird taste to it. I'm with you. I'm not a big stevia fan either. But monk fruit. If you guys ever look into monk fruit, it's a 0-calorie sweetener. It tastes wonderful. I think it tastes. I've tried these artificial sweeteners in the past. Not a fan of them. This monk fruit sweetener is phenomenal. It's a naturally occurring sweetener. And then coconut, there's actually a coconut sweetener that can be used as well. And again, we want to make sure we're not spiking our blood glucose. And interesting enough, with these artificial sweeteners, if you consume something that even if there isn't calories in it, if it tastes sweet, there is still going to be an insulin response. Your body is going to respond to that. And so we're trying, the whole purpose of us consuming these artificial sweeteners is we are trying to keep that insulin response from happening, but we still have the insulin response. So hence why there's all these other issues that go right along with it. So here's a great question. What is your greatest challenge in creating healthy habits? So this will be an open question. I would love some feedback here. Awesome. Thank you guys. This is super helpful. So some feedback we got, 25% of people said it was a lack of motivation. Some people said they don't know what to do. And then 50%, so half of the people on the call today said that it's just other health challenges, potential other greatest challenge to living a healthier lifestyle. So thank you guys for that. And I want to talk about the motivation piece specifically. And then somebody asked, they heard that stevia was better than Splenda. And yes, I would wholeheartedly agree. I would suggest using stevia instead of Splenda. And then understanding the other names of those, and I'm going to go back to this for a second. Let's see. I want to go back to the names of these. So sucralose, aspartame, acetylene K, saccharin. If you're looking on the ingredients list, those are the chemical names you will see on the ingredients list if it contains artificial sweeteners. So sucralose, that stuff is everywhere. That's Splenda, and it is in so many different foods, and it can be really tough to avoid. So you just have to kind of look through it carefully, and I would do your best to try to minimize it. That would be my suggestion. So I'm not gonna, we're not gonna go into this whole I guess religious debate here today, but I do think people who, especially as people I walk through as they're battling cancer and severe disease, like the importance of having a belief in a higher power and taking care of themselves emotionally, and the emotional health thing, it can be yourself sometimes beating yourself up and speaking words over yourself. I would just think about, in a day-to-day basis, are you using more negative or positive words when you're speaking? And the people around you, are they using more negative or positive words, such as can't, won't, couldn't, shouldn't, wouldn't, things like that? Those are negative words. Versus conversely, we should, we could, things like that. We're trying to stay positive. And how are you speaking to yourself? You beat yourself up, because we are our own worst critics. And so I've heard it said that if you say one negative thing to yourself, it takes that 10 positive things to kind of counteract that. And so just from an emotional headspace, being protective of who you surround yourself with, who you share your dreams with. Are they going to speak life into those dreams, or are they going to drag you down? And just being very wise, again, with who you're doing life with. Be intentional with that decision. Don't let proximity be the key determining factor of your close friends. A great book I want to recommend to you guys is Atomic Habits. So this is by James Clear. Absolutely outstanding book. And it just talks, this guy, I don't want to ruin the book for you. I would suggest reading it. It is rich, so full of great information. But if we were to just look at a general premise, the goal is just to get 1% better every day. Most people drastically overestimate what they can accomplish in 12 months and drastically underestimate what they can accomplish in 5 years. And I believe it was Jerry Seinfeld who talked about don't break the chain. That was his key to success for becoming, I think he's arguably the most successful comedian in history. If I understand it, financially, the most successful comedian in history, Jerry Seinfeld. And he was doing a talk once and talked about how he would write material every single day and put a red X through a calendar on days that he wrote material. And he said it doesn't have to be good material. It's just staying consistent, doing it every single day, such as I'm working out every single day. And maybe I didn't make it to the gym today, but can I still get home and go for a quick walk around the neighborhood? Can I still, in my office, at lunch, I'm going to take a quick break. And I'm going to try to do 25 push-ups and 50 air squats. And, you could do that all in less than 5 minutes. It's just, I'm going to do something to keep myself physically active. Today, I'm going to, instead of going to fast food for lunch, I'm going to be intentional and try to prep my meals for the week. I'm going to go grocery shopping to be more intentional about the chemicals that are going in my body. So these, and here's the thing, is it's okay not to be perfect. It's okay to mess up a day, but try not to do it twice in a row. Because we want to keep momentum, because momentum goes both ways. We can have momentum towards positive, healthy choices, or momentum towards the other way. So we want to keep the momentum going positively, our way to stay healthier. And a question I got here is soy. Is tofu considered soy? So yes, so tofu is primarily soy-based. That is correct. So thank you for that. That's a great point. Try to minimize soy. So if you are vegan, if you're vegetarian, some of that stuff can be tougher to avoid, and you have to be very intentional with it. Your health is your responsibility. So nobody can do this for you. And I know that's, it can be a gut check for somebody. A lot of people, and I go back to our society, a lot of people put their health in the hands of their doctor. Or a lot of people say, this is what my, stuff that I hear in my practice is, this is what my wife makes me, so that's what I eat. Right? Or this is the way I was raised. My parents raised me on fried chicken and collard greens. And that's why I eat fried chicken and collard greens. This is just the way it was, the way I was raised, this is what my spouse does, or, this is what my doctor said I should or should not do, or I'm going to wait for my doctor to tell me what I should or should not do. Your health is your responsibility, and nobody can do this for you. We get one shot at this life. There is no practice run, right? This is not the practice run. We get to do life one time here. And I want to kind of wrap up with this. You guys ever travel? They tell you to put your mask on first. And the reason for that is you can't help anybody else if you don't take care of yourself first. Think about, if you're a parent, what example are you setting for your children? If you're not taking care of yourself, what will your kids see? What I hear a lot are adults blaming their parents for their poor health, which we go back to the previous slide, right? Responsibility. But we have to take care of ourselves first before we can help anyone else. If we're trying to help our spouse, we have to take care of ourselves before we can help our spouse. We have to help ourselves before we can really take care of our children and do it correctly. If we are sacrificing our health for somebody else, it's never going to be as effective. Things I have seen a mother that has horrifically sacrificed her health trying to help her daughters. And what I mean by that is she has really kind of put a lot of garbage food into her body, and we've seen how it's impacted her health. She's more inflamed, she's been more ill, and she's trying to take care of her kids and talk to her kids and asking me to talk to her kids as her daughters are in here. And we're talking to them, but your actions will always be louder than your words. And that's across the board, right? And we all know that. Your actions will always be louder than your words. Thank you guys for having me and hanging with me. I hope this was helpful for you guys. As you can tell, we put a lot into this. We wanted to try to get as much into this as we can without being horrifically overwhelming and overloading you guys with stats. Hopefully there's some good action steps here. This is my contact info. And if you guys need help or want to find a really good chiropractor in your area, there's a resource we have set up for you. The website is ICPA, the number 4, kids.org. And if you go to that website, you can find chiropractors in your area that are really well trained with a focus on pediatric and perinatal care, but they can take care of anybody, people of all ages, but they have put in a lot of work and time in their postgraduate career to just be excellent at the craft of chiropractic.
Listetor, thank you so much for that information. Such important information when we think about controlling our care and overall wellness, and those components that make up overall wellness: nutrition, physical activity, social emotional health. So, just a question for you, from a nutritional standpoint, for those who may be on a budget, and understanding that sometimes those healthier foods could cost more money, where do you think they should start? Do you have any advice?
Yeah, that's an awesome question. So I've personally lived that for a long time. That was my life. And so I would look at certain things, like you can go to Walmart and you can stay at a really budget friendly place and still get some healthy foods. You can go to, if you have a Costco membership or a Sam's Club membership, you can get a lot of healthy foods in those places. But I would walk into, number one, what's on the ingredients list, and here's a list of ingredients where it's an absolute no. Like if this is in the ingredients list, I don't want this in my body. Here's a list where, okay, this is a maybe, but I want to limit this stuff, right? I don't want a lot of this in my diet. I want to limit this. And then here's the list where it's like, this is really what we're looking for. And so we kind of have that compromise a little bit. Think about, you can go get a big bag of frozen chicken. I think flash frozen vegetables contain more nutrient dense, or they're more nutrient dense than a lot of the fresh vegetables in the produce section. So on my household, we eat a lot of frozen vegetables. We shop in that frozen section for our vegetables, and usually they're a little bit more cost effective too. So just things like that. Just try to prioritize certain things the best you can, and there absolutely is a way to do it in a budget friendly way, just to minimize those processed foods.
Thank you. You can now enter any questions that you may have in the Q&A section through your application. We have a question here for you, Dr. Lisetor. You mentioned, and we saw from the survey results, that many have a health challenge that prevents them from being active. If we have, or someone has, a difficulty with mobility, can they still exercise sitting down? Or what advice would you have for someone who may have mobility difficulties?
Yeah, there's a gentleman that I take care of that he is a veteran and he lost his leg. And so he has some mobility difficulties as well. And it's really just about getting creative. And I think from what I've experienced, some people will use their disability or mobility as more of their excuse of why they can't do it. And then the people who want to do it will usually be the ones that will find a way. And it's just, how bad do you want it? But if you are in that place where you're disabled, there's a certain level of like lack of motivation. It's almost like the thief has come and taken away a certain aspect of your freedom, and you have to kind of adapt to it. And so if we think about, it would obviously depend on the disability and what's going on. But you think, we have the Special Olympics, and you look at these men and women and their level of performance, and it's just outstanding what they've been able to push through and accomplish. And I applaud I like the Special Olympics probably better than the regular Olympics. It's just outstanding what they have been able to do. And yes, it requires creativity. It requires a strong will. And I go back to the importance of having good accountability and people in your life that are for you. They are pulling for you. They're not trying to drag you down.
That's great. It segues into this next question, right? You have to have a strong mind to keep going and to push through. We've heard that exercising our mind is part of overall health. How does someone exercise their mind?
Yeah, that's an awesome question. I think, so me personally, I'm a reader. I love books. I listen to a lot of audiobooks. I have a long commute to work and back. And I think if you're listening to personal development books, that's a great way to exercise your mind. I think having intentional conversations and potentially conversations with people who see the world differently than you. A lot of people tend to surround themselves with people who think very similar to the way they think. But if you have conversations with people who don't see the world the same way you do, it can be helpful. I forgot who coined this, but I believe the quote goes something along the lines of it is the mark of a well-educated mind to entertain a thought without accepting it. And it's just, again, I go back to intentionality. What are you putting in your head? Are you sitting in front of a TV all day, or are you reading books? And there's a vast difference between those two.
Very good. I think most of us are tied to our phones throughout the day, so it's always good to pick up a book every now and then.
Yeah, and with the phone too, that's a great point, because you know what I see a lot in my practice here. I'll try to turn the screen so you guys can see me, but I see the cell phone posture. The cell phone posture, right? And
Yes.
so think about, you know, the global impact that can have on your body versus if we try to hang out here, just kind of change our mechanics a little bit.
So speaking of your chiropractic services, if someone is interested in receiving some type of chiropractic service, how do they know if it is a covered benefit by their insurance? And if it's not a covered benefit, how do they go about receiving such care?
Awesome question. Yeah, so I can say my office specifically, we do accept a lot of insurance policies, but obviously we don't accept all of them. So, you know, the larger company like Blue Cross Blue Shield, Cigna, obviously, you know, Medicare. So we are in network with those guys and those companies, I should say. But it will vary based upon the region. There's different insurance policies throughout the nation that people have. And so it will ultimately be up to the provider to determine which health insurance they want to work with. Because, you know, for instance, for me as a provider, we still accept United Healthcare, but United is not an easy company for us to work with. They have made it very, very complicated for us to their billing process. It's less than ideal, and so there's a chance that we may end up getting out of network with United. But that would be a specific question for the chiropractor you are considering. And while we're talking about this, I think another great thing to tag along with this is, how do you find a good chiropractor? Because the ICPA, I think, is a great website, but I have heard and seen so many horror stories. Like, we've had people come in that have actually been injured by other chiropractors that we've kind of had to put Humpty Dumpty back together again. And I think things to avoid or minimize when you're seeking out a chiropractor. One, in my doctorate program, I took 2 courses for physical therapy. Okay. And there's a physical therapy board that was one of the easiest exams I've taken in my entire life. And in the states of North and South Carolina, I am legally permitted to practice physical therapy on people. There are individuals that they've done their entire doctorate in physical therapy. So they are doctors of physical therapy. If you need physical therapy, I would go see a doctor of physical therapy. Don't see a chiropractor for it. That is my opinion. Okay. And because a doctor of physical therapy is a true expert. There are chiropractors that are trying to sell people laser machines. There are, you know, treat neuropathy. There's chiropractors trying to sell every supplement known to man to people. There's chiropractors that are doing dry needling and acupuncture. All these are things that aren't actually taught in chiropractic school. So a chiropractor should be doing a proper and thorough exam on you. They should be taking all necessary x-rays on you before they put their hands on you. And they should be making sure that they are explaining to you what they're doing before they do it. And if they don't check those boxes, I would find someone else. I'd be very weary about letting somebody put their hands on you who has not done the proper examinations and explain very clearly what they are going to do and what their findings are. Okay.
Perfect. That is such good information that will help us in amplifying our voice and really taking control of our care. Thank you for your time today, Dr. Lisetor, for sharing your expertise in this very informative session. Thank each of you for joining us today. We encourage you to complete the brief survey that you'll receive after this webinar. If you are not already doing so, please follow us on social media at Accessia Health to learn more about other presentations and upcoming webinar series. Again, thank you, and we look forward to your feedback. Have a great day.